Hi there, I'm Colin, and you're watching my FlossTube channel, Stitchpocalypse. Today is not going to be a regular FlossTube. Today I'm going to be doing a 2025 finish parade. So I'll just be showing everything that I finished over the last year. I have 12 finishes, which is actually like perfect. There's something very perfect to me about 12 finishes. One finish a month feels really right. Oh, I'm filming at night. Okay, let's be real. It's not that late. It's maybe like 5:30, but I'm filming much later than I normally do. Usually I try to film when it's still the daytime because I feel like my stitching looks better in natural sunlight, but I'm not doing that right now. Yeah, so today I'm going to be posting a finish parade, and I'm also kind of treating this as like a year in review. So I'll be talking about my year of stitching, my year of FlossTube, which this was my first year posting FlossTubes, which is very exciting. Talking about sort of things that have, how do I want to put this? Like certain trends that have, I guess, popped up in my stitching over the past year, the changes that have happened in my stitching, and just kind of generally what I've been up to this past year thematically. Not image, that's not a word. But like in terms of themes and images and style and color and taste and ideas. I just will be generally talking about the year. I will not be showing any whips. So for many of you who have been watching my FlossTube channel, this is the last time you will see these projects until they get fully finished. And I'm not going to be talking about any of my kind of goals for the upcoming year. I have decided that I'm going to be doing like a looking back, looking forward. So this is kind of my looking back on the year, showing the things that are staying here in 2025, I guess. In there, they're not fully completed. I have fully finished 0 things this year. Well, I fully finished 1 thing. But at least for me, these things are kind of just emblematic of the time of this year, of whatever. This is a slightly different video for me, so it might seem a little off kilter. My last FlossTube video was also kind of stilted. I have been much worse at posting lately, and so yeah, I'm not as natural on camera as I was like 2 or 3 months ago. Okay, I normally show projects in chronological order, so I'm kind of showing things as I'm stitching them or as I'm finishing them. I'm not going to be doing that today. Today I have separated them into 4 distinct themes: Christmas, novelty, Sal, animal crackers, and samplers. And that's how I'm gonna talk about them. The first thing I finished this year, and I finished it before I had ever filmed or posted a FlossTube, and so I actually don't think that I might have showed it. Oh, I don't even know what this is called. I'm not sure what this is called. I'm not showing any of the charts. I'll put it in the description what it's called. I know who designed it. This is a series of Christmas ornaments designed by my girl, Sandy Orton. I'm pretty sure, yeah. And I had stitched all of them but 1 up until like I finished all of them in 2024, and then I finished 1 of them in 2025. And so I am gonna just show them to you now. So these are 5 of them. And then there are 2 more down here. I'm gonna flip that over. These are stitched on a 32 count Lugana in antique white with the called for flosses, the called for DMCs, and they're done 2/2. So that's what, so just kind of classic Sandy Orton smalls. If you're ever looking to try a Sandy, for those of you who've never watched, for those of you who aren't locked in on the Stitchpocalypse discourse, I am Sandy Orton's #1 fan. Well, maybe not. I don't know every Sandy Orton fan, but I certainly am one of the Sandy Orton's biggest fans. I love her so deeply. To me, she just has such a clear understanding of the way that like floss and fabric can interact to create kind of like really bold but also very detailed images using not that many stitches. And so for those of you who are looking to maybe try a Sandy Orton piece but are overwhelmed by her stockings or the sampler series that she has, this would be a really, really great place to start. Particularly, I'm gonna show a couple of them that I think are quite classic Sandy. I will say they have much less backstitching on them than most Sandy Orton pieces. I like backstitching. Sorry, don't shoot. I like backstitching. I honestly feel like I should have made a martini. But this one in particular, this beehive, has just such an incredible amount of depth and kind of texture here, but it's actually just not that many stitches. And yeah, that's the kind of thing that I really love and appreciate about Sandy Orton, is that she is capable. These might just be called like gardener's ornaments. I'll put it in the description. But yeah, I cannot recommend stitching a Sandy Orton piece enough. And if you've never done one and you're looking to start small, these are a really great way to try. They're available from Cooler Designs. And yeah, and I finished this in January. I will eventually turn these into ornaments. I told myself that I would get it done by Christmas this year. It's the 27th, so that's not gonna happen, but maybe next year. The second Christmas pieces that I finished are 2 of these hands-on designs flamingo Christmas ornaments. They have different names and I'll tell you the different names. In 2024, I had finished Flamingo, so this is not a finish from this year. This was a finish that I did at the end in 2024. But I did finish 2 of the other ones, which are Flamingo Bells and Flamingo All the Way. These are stitched on, let's see, I have this is I guess a notebook system from the Travelers Company that I use to track all my stitching. And so I'm gonna see. This is on a 28 count Charles Craft linen. And, oh, and I'm doing it with my own DMC conversion. I think it calls for Weeks Dye Works. I just cannot be bothered to buy fancy cotton. I'm sorry. there's just so many things I want to spend my money on that seems like one that, I don't know, the DMCs just do look so like lush, right? And the reality is most people die on a DMC anyway. But this is done with my own DMC conversion on 28 count Charles Craft linen. I would never stitch on this fabric again. This one, yeah, I'm fine with this fabric being the last time. I got this early on in my stitching, kind of whatever. And it was definitely like an impulse start. And so I had just like gone to Michael's and like bought whatever fabric they had. I also thought I would turn these into ornaments by the end of the year. I had a lot of big finishing plans. And I did get fabric to put on the backs of them, but obviously that didn't happen. I guess I'll talk about kind of trends at the end. I will say these are probably too like silly. They're like silly in a they're hedging their bets. That's actually how I feel about them. I think they're silly in a way that isn't like committed to the silliness in the way that most of the things if I'm stitching silly, I'm stitching silly. And these are definitely silly. They could be sillier, right? Yeah. And then the final Christmas finishes I've had this year these are from the Prairie Schooler. These are 2 ornaments from Holidays. This is done with my own DMC conversion, and it's stitched on maybe a 36 count. Yeah, a 36 count light taupe Modena. Yeah, they're stitched on a 36 count light taupe Modena with my own DMC conversion. So that's one of the ones that I finished. And then this is the second one. There are still 4 more of these. I'll just show it to you. Because I actually have the chart here because it's still technically a whip. There are 4 more of these that I'm going to be stitching. I am not stitching all of them. I'm not stitching these 2. So I'm working on one of them and then I will do the other ones. But those are the 2 ornaments from Holidays. Do I want to show you the backs of things? And those are all my Christmas finishes. Now we're gonna get into some things that they're more interesting to me. I would not describe myself as a Christmas hater, but I definitely am not like a Christmas mega fan, right? Some people are like Christmas mega fans. I like Christmas. So that's Christmas. Now we're kind of moving on to, I guess I'm calling them novelty, which are projects that are fun and light and kind of silly, and I guess they're absurd in a way that is maybe more in line with my taste. So the first one I am going to be showing you is Strawberry Bird. This is by Kathy Barrick. This is stitched also on maybe a 32 count Lugana. I honestly have become a Lugana hater. I just, yeah, it's on a 32 count Lugana with my own DMC conversion. One of my goals was to really brighten up the colors and really boost the saturation of the picture. So I think it might also have been called for with weeks or a very desaturated DMC conversion. but I obviously did it with a really, really bright red and a bright yellow. You're probably, if you look at the chart, you're probably looking at what I've stitched and you're thinking like, what the fuck, right? What the fuck is this weird man doing that is nothing like it? And so this one, I'll just show you the picture. I have this kind of image in my mind that this will be finished as kind of like a mobile, and particularly like a soft finish. So each piece will be turned into its own individual pillow. And then those pillows will be attached to each other in such a way that it will make mobile. And here is the little sketch that I did of it. If you're interested in my color conversion, screenshot now. I started this as part of the Strawberry Moon Sale, which was hosted by Marjorie. I started and finished. Well, I didn't finish it. I don't think I finished it in the month, but I did finish it in the summer. And so I think that's probably what my goal is going to be for Strawberry Moon Sales going forward, is that it's something that I'll start in June as part of the Strawberry Moon Sale, and then I'll stitch it kind of through the summer, and the goal will be that I'll finish it by the summer. This was hosted by Marjorie Maid, which I think I said already like 5 seconds ago. I love Marjorie. I recognize there's something really crazy about saying this as someone who posts really inconsistently and like maybe every 6 weeks. I wish Marjorie posted every week. I would be so fucking locked into a Marjorie Maid floss tube week extravaganza. And yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. Basically, I love Marjorie and I wish she would post every week, but the reality is the reasons that I love her content so much is because she is not the kind of person who has the kind of life that she would post every week. So anyway, love the Strawberry Moon Sale. This was really fun. This was, oh, I don't know why I didn't call this category Sal's. Why did I call it novelty? I'm going back in time and I'm saying Sal. 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 Okay. This was only the second Sal I'd ever done, so that was very exciting. And it was the first Sal I'd ever finished. But that is Strawberry Bird by Kathy Barrick. It's also the first Kathy Barrick piece I ever stitched. And I know people love her. And honestly, it was fun. I don't like the original colors. The second thing I have to show you is something in this category. Is something that I did. I thought I would have it finished by the end of this year. And then I thought I wouldn't have it finished by the end of this year. And in my last floss tube, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish this before the end of the year. And then, well, I said that about 2 different things, right? And then I turned off the video. I stopped filming. I stitched for 2 days, right? I finished one of them. I stitched for 3 more days. And then I finished this. So I don't know why on like December 12th, I was like, I definitely don't have enough time, whatever. This was the first Sal I was ever in. I started this as part of the Bring Out Your Kits Sal, which was hosted by the Thread Gremlins and Jen's Fiberweb. It was a Sal where you were to find, or any, if you had them, any like vintage kit and stitch it. And it was, yeah, it was very exciting. I am someone who, how do I put this? I like the like market frenzy. I like when new stuff comes out and you get to be like, the new, the new animal cracker. Like I like that. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I'm like better than that. But I do think that people, if they're willing to open themselves up to things like from the past, they might find things that they like more. And so I think that the Bring Out Your Kits Sal was really, really fun. But yeah, And so I finished it. This is Clown Dreams. It's by Designworks. It was part of a kit, so I don't know what kind of fabric. I don't know what kind of floss it's on. I don't know who made the fabric. I know it's about a 16 count Aida, which I am not an Aida stitcher. This is maybe the only time I've ever stitched on Aida, outside of when I was like 6. But I'll give you some good close-ups because this thing is cute. Oh, and Elizabeth from the Thread Gremlins, when she was like conceptualizing the Bring Out Your Kit style, she also was stitching on a clown kit that was like a wizard. And so I found this and I was like, I'm gonna stitch that terrible clown. And I'm using terrible as a compliment. I want to be sure. But the thing about this that's so special is there are some really, really idiotic details that really kind of make me like giggle. So for example, he is a hobo clown. I mean, I would assume he's like a hobo clown, or at least a poverty-stricken clown who's mending his own clothes. And one of the things that's so funny is that his toes be out. His shoes are so worn that his shoe has a hole in it and his toes are out. And his little dog. But it's just the little stuff like that. Like the way these, like this clown socks. His 5 o'clock shadow. But whoever designed this for Designworks was really comfortable like leaning into the horribleness of this. But that is Clown Dreams. I finished this last week. And thus ends, at least for me, the Bring Out Your Kit style. It's so cool. We're gonna put it behind the door. Maybe in the bathroom or like in our entryway, so that way when people come over and they like you can't see it, and then they shut the door and there's this like clown behind them. It's just so stupid. It's just so stupid. This is to me the dumbest thing I've ever stitched, and probably will be for a time. But I am incredibly happy with this finish. There is quite a lot of backstitching because it's a vintage kit and people didn't have that backstitch hatred they have now. But I don't mind. I like backstitching. And that's the end of my salad category. The next category I have to show you is my animal crackers. I have finished 3 animal crackers. I'm currently working on a 4th. I have stitched Miss Hazel. I have stitched Peroy. Miss Hazel is I think a squirrel. I have stitched Peroy, who is a slug, and I have stitched Harrison, who is a rabbit. I am stitching these on 46 count flax. I'm pretty sure it's in flax. Yeah, 46 count flax by Zweigart. With my own conversion of 100 threes. So I'm stitching this with silk. And I guess I'll say this. When I first started stitching my animal crackers with silk, I was very much just trying to, maybe these are also called for with weeks, maybe Classic Colorworks. At first, I was really trying to like one-to-one recreate the called for colors of the animal crackers. So I was like really working hard to make sure that the colors were accurate. And then as I stitched other ones, and so this, I've now stitched 4 because I've also stitched Bobbin, which he does not live with us. He is with my friend Katie. I started to realize that actually I don't need to do that. And I actually think that the animal crackers were a big part of why now I'm so comfortable making crazy conversions. Or maybe not crazy conversions, but like really allowing myself to make conversions because I actually like the ones that I've chosen for myself much better than I like the called for. I think that everyone should do color conversions all the time. That's kind of my belief about these kind of things. I actually wish sometimes the like charts didn't have called for colors on them at all, and they just wrote like blue, dark blue, and then I could pick, or even just like dark color, right? But I realize that's not what everyone wants, and I also realize that my approach to my stitching is really different than other people's. You probably might not see that too much in this video because most of the things I've finished this year are things that I've started in previous years, particularly like series. And so as I've like come to my stitching now on December 27th, 2025, the way I was stitching in September 2024 is actually really different. And my confidence in my stitching is really different now than it was then. And I was pretty confident then. But I'm going to show you Miss Hazel. So she's very cute. So that's Miss Hazel. And then Paroy. Which you can see that like Miss Hazel color-wise is quite close to the called for. But then Paroy is starting to get a little bit kind of grosser, a little bit more kind of muck colored. And then Harrison, who is probably the most different from the called for. His sweater in the called for is 2 colors. I expanded it into 4 colors. I wanted it to look more, I don't know, he looks both kind of 70s and also kind of like 90s skater, which I guess are both fine with me. But yeah. But like things like his ears. So in the original, his ears only call for 1 color on the inside, and I didn't like that. I actually wanted it to be closer to the way Miss Hazel's ears were. And so I changed it. If you have any questions about these conversions, sometimes people will ask me about this one. I can put the 103 colors in the comments, but also like I would invite you to not do that. Not that I don't want to tell you, it's more so that like this is for my taste based on what exists in my home. You should do a version that's your taste that exists in your home. Ooh. Anyway, those are my animal crackers. And then on the back I have my little bit of Maggie May. I really like the animal crackers. I am not someone who does a lot of things that are block stitch heavy. Particularly now, I find myself doing a lot of things that either have really like intense color changes or are not big kind of chunks of one color like over and over again. But occasionally I need a break from the kind of things that I'm doing, and to me an animal cracker is like the easiest way to get away from that. But because it's on such a small fabric, it doesn't feel dull to stitch them. I have 2 more things to show you, both of which are samplers. The first one is EMCM Anno 1787? Yeah, EMCM Anno 1787 by Modern Folk Embroidery. This is done on a 36 count terracotta linen by Zweigart with a 103 conversion. And this is what it looks like. This is the only fully finished object I have from the year. The lights are kind of wide. Oh, that's better. That's a lot better, actually. That's kind of exactly what it looks like. So this is just a small sampler that I have done with my own silk conversion. This one, I just kind of picked out colors I liked and then went on vibes. So I just kind of was like, oh, I like that there. I'll stitch that in that color. And it turned out really well. So if you see here, I have underlined the CM of EMCM because those are my initials, Colin Martin. And over here I have put the year I finished it, so 2025, and then 1787 is the year that she finished it. Originally the 17 was here and the 87 was here. So I just kind of moved those things around. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. This was... Yeah, I really love a sampler. I stitch mostly samplers now. And this was my attempt to stitch samplers that are more finishable because it is quite tiny. But it is really small. And I started this in April of this year and I finished it in May. So there's something very exciting about just a 1 month little sampler. But I have planned on doing a series of small samplers. I'm working on a slightly larger one now and then kind of attaching them in so they can hang. So they're just like little pennants hanging. But yeah, and there's my conversion. This was quite fun. I like a Modern Folk Embroidery piece. I don't love how much the leaves. The most of his originals have like a lot of, they're very leaf heavy. I don't love that, but I love this. And I love a lot of the other reproductions he chooses. I think he has really, really good, Jacob. I think he has really good, he has particularly good taste when it comes to choosing which samplers to reproduce, which is very much a skill. And then the final finish I have to show you is by far the most exciting thing that I finished this year. The one that I'm the most proud of. Probably the finish I'm most proud of, period. In many ways, my masterpiece. And that is Anno 1817 by Reflet des Soies. This is I don't know if I'd call it a heavily modified version. I have made quite substantial changes to the original, including there was an additional border around here that I took out. I squished it by quite a lot. I changed this entire interior section. It did not have a quote at all. And yeah. But this is what it looks like. So this is a mending sampler. I don't know. Yeah, that's pretty good. Oh, it looks really good in this light. Okay, so this is a mending sampler, which a mending sampler was I say this in every video, but I'll probably never say it again. I don't know. I'm going to do another mending sampler in the future because I love this, but Am I really going to continue doing the same kind of spiel about mending samplers every time? Maybe. But a mending sampler is a tool that girls would use to like learn how to mend, in the same way that like an alphabet sampler was a tool that girls used to become literate and also learn like initials and letters that they would then use to like embroider on their handkerchief or their jacket or their whatever. But essentially for this, anytime a woven garment got a hole in it because of the mending that they would learn on this sampler, they would be able to repair it. For the most part, you wouldn't even be able to tell they had repaired it. And so essentially how it's stitched is, let me find one that's like quite obvious. I'll show you on this. Okay, so on this, oh, I'm really struggling. Okay, yeah, you can see that quite well. On this, essentially what you do is a running stitch through the fabric, and then you float the floss over top of this section. So the section that's darker, you float the fabric, the floss over top of it, because this is where the hole would be. So essentially it's not stitched at all in this fabric here. And then you do the running stitch along the other side. To do the other section, you stitch, once again, a running stitch through the fabric, and then you weave the floss you're stitching this way through the warp, which is what it is, in the pattern of the material. So this is not mended into the pattern of this linen. It's mended to learn how to make certain twills, which I think this linen would be a twill, but this is like a different pattern twill. And then you stitch it through along the other side. And essentially it creates a new piece of fabric over top of the fabric and the hole. And so it's quite strong. It'll make sense when you see the back. So as you can see, this is where the hole would be, and there's no stitching there because the goal is to reinforce the fabric and to create a new fabric over top of it that is attached. In the center of this, I have put also a thing that to be mentioned is like stitching this has been kind of hell for me. At first I found it really, really difficult, partly because I started it with silk, which was a dumb idea. I want to be clear, if you're doing a mending sampler, do not start with silk. Because the silk was so slippery, right? Because silk is so much more slippery than cotton. It was actually quite a lot harder to keep it in the fabric. So the silk was coming out a lot. I was like re-threading my needle quite a bit. I was having trouble with the weaving section. And so the top border, not this, but this top border over to this flower and then down to here is done in silk. And these three motifs at the top, they are done in silk as well, except for this motif, which halfway through I changed to cotton. And you can't really tell. You can tell a little bit. You can definitely tell by feeling it. And I had quite a lot of trouble with this because the silk was making it really difficult to stitch. And also it was a totally new skill that I didn't know at all from a chart in a language that I do not speak. And not that it was a difficult chart, it's just that it was, not in a language I spoke. And so I wouldn't say I taught myself how to do it, but I definitely think that it was a lot more trial and error than I had ever experienced with anything I was stitching. And so this was actually quite difficult for me to stitch because I had faced so many difficulties. Also, at one point, I stabbed myself really badly with my needle and bled, not all over it, but certainly had gotten blood on it. And then had a lot of difficulty getting the blood off. And I have gotten it off for the most part. But yeah, and so I just have had a lot of difficulties with this, at least in like the first third of stitching it. And then like something happened and I just like understood it. It was like I was just working on it one day and I was like, this is easy now. And then I had a real blast stitching it. I had so much fun stitching this. And I had so much fun doing these mendings. And I mean, I'd already changed the colors quite drastically from the called for. And I just kind of was like, I'm going to roll with like making this more my own. Like, this is my stitching. Sorry to PFI, whoever she is. Yeah. And so then I moved the motifs around here and I put this quote in. This is a quote from a song by Addison Rae, whom I love. It's from Headphones On, which is the best song of the year. La 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 la. And yeah, and I guess it sort of captured both my love of like meaningless affirmations and also kind of a reality of my process stitching this, which says, I know the lows are what makes the highs higher, so I tell myself this is a reminder, life's no fun through clear waters. And I really do feel like this, maybe about life in general, but also definitely about this sampler, is that when I look at this now, the difficulties that I was experiencing stitching at first have made it so much more fun to stitch and almost also so much more special to me. So, yeah, I mean, if you've never done a mending sampler, I cannot recommend it enough. Please stitch with cotton. I did this on 32 count. I would probably recommend doing it on 32 count too if you're just starting. Particularly if you've never like woven before. I will probably do another mending sampler in my future. And I think I want to do like a 46 or even a 56 count. Just to see what that looks like. How, like pushing that kind of thing to see what that looks like. But yeah, this is Anno 1817 by Reflet des Soives, sort of. And I'm just really proud of this. I can't believe that I stitched something this special. So, and those are all my finishes for the year, which is, yeah. Just one more time. I feel weird about that I'll never show this again until it's fully finished. Although, I can't talk about it in this video because it's a plan for the future. I have plans. I'm moving in silence. Now that I'm done dropping things everywhere and whatever, I do want to talk a little bit about some, I guess now we're in the year in review section of the video. I've taken a couple notes. And so now I'm going to talk about some of the trends that have popped up in my own stitching, both from things that I have started and the kinds of things that I have really been drawn to this past year. The reason I'm filming this video before I film a whip parade, which usually people do it in the other direction, is because at the end of my whip parade, I am going to do a similar section of like what kind of ideas and concepts and images and colors am I hoping to push forward in 2026. And so many of them kind of exist in either tandem or as building off of things that I've done this year, or as in like a kind of negative response, like pushing away. Yeah, and so I'm going to talk about a couple things. In my stitching, one of my kind of goals for the year, which has been quite successful, is that I really wanted to stitch more in silk. I really wanted to stitch more with silk. I think the way that silk reflects light is so beautiful. I like a cotton floss. You're never going to hear me talk bad about a DMC. You might hear me talk bad about a fancy floss. But the reality is, like, good quality silk is expensive because it's good. Because it's better, right? I'm not sold, particularly because I don't like a variegated thread. I'm not sold that a fancy cotton floss is better than a DMC. But I am sold that a fancy silk floss is better than a DMC. And it's because of the way that it reflects light. And I just think there is something so special about a way that a silk thread reflects light and the way that it lays on the fabric. And the ease of like a 1-strand 103 goes into the fabric, sits on the fabric. There is something so kind of magical. I don't want to say sexual, but there is something kind of sensual about the silk that cotton does not have. Sorry to you cotton fetishists out there. And I really wanted to use it more, feel much more confident with it, which is something that I have absolutely done. I have been doing my animal crackers with silk. I have done a couple of small samplers with silk. You saw one of them finished. I started another one this year. And in particular, this year on my birthday, I started a large modified reproduction sampler that's going to be entirely done in silk. And I'm never going to be someone who doesn't stitch with cotton. But I do think that, like, for me, a special project, specific projects deserve silk and specific projects deserve cotton. And that doesn't mean that the ones that deserve cotton are higher quality. It just means that there's something about the material quality of silk that I think speaks to the images of the project more than cotton. And I can't really explain to you the logic behind that, but maybe I'll figure that out. In conjunction with that, this year I also had a goal of getting the entire DMC color line. So my goal is to have every single color in my stash at all times. I don't need 2 of them. I don't need 3 of them. I don't need 5 of them. I just need 1. And as of this week, I have done it. So that's very exciting. I talked a little bit about my storage, and essentially my mom found, but an old floss storage container from a store on Facebook Marketplace, and bought it and has fixed it up a little bit, and so now I use it as my DMC storage, and it's worked incredibly well. So those are 2 goals that have been quite successful. Another thing I really felt this year, I wanted to do more color conversions. I think early on, I felt very comfortable doing color conversions for like monochromatic samplers. Like really early on, I started a long dog that I have done a color conversion for that was a monochromatic sampler that now has a variety of colors. I'm still working on that, but I think more so this year I really allowed myself to make pretty substantial changes to some of my projects in terms of the called for. And in fact, like EMCM Anno 1817, not not that one. Anno 1817. When I originally started it, I had no intention to include a neon green. So I had no, that was not part of it at all. And as I was stitching it, I just felt like it was missing a certain like boldness and a certain weirdness and a certain like contemporary quality that I wanted from it. And yeah, I guess this year I have gotten a lot better at trusting my gut with my stitching and also like allowing myself to be wrong. Really not feeling like just because I started something and there's something a little bit off about it, it doesn't mean that I have to like continue stitching it forever, but it also doesn't mean that I have to just get rid of it. Yeah, just kind of trusting my intuition, but also allowing my intuition to be wrong. Yeah. Also this year, I found myself really drawn to red. Really drawn to like reds and oranges and really bright, really, really bold red colors. I think we saw that from Strawberry Bird, which was not called for with that bright, 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 bright red. We saw that with the fabric I chose for EMCM Anno 1787. I started a red sampler for my birthday. Franzi, which I would say right now is probably my number one project I'm stitching on, has a ton of red, and I started that in January. Even something like my floss tube introduction, like my intro, my title sequence, is very red heavy. And yeah, I just kind of found myself through the year really drawn to these bright, bright red colors as sort of an eye-catching thing. I don't like thing. Thing's not right. Color's not right either. But there is something really kind of shocking and attention-grabbing about a bold red. And I don't know how much, like, I don't know about, well, I do, but we'll talk about it later. That maybe it certainly wasn't something that I was intending this year, but now looking back, I can really see the way in which I found myself drawn to that. If I'm thinking about kind of the why, right? Yeah, because I can say like, oh, I found myself kind of continuously pulling on these bright, bright red colors. In some ways, I think that at least in my title sequence, I can't speak to, I mean, I guess I can, is that I do think that there's something quite alarming like happening in the world. And that kind of bright red, I guess, is like my response to it, or me kind of pulling from the colors in my day-to-day life. Right? Like everything's an alert. Everything's an emergency. Everything's a disaster. And it all is just shown with this kind of bright red kind of exclamation point, frowny face. I think also I want my stitching to be eye-catching. Which honestly, now that I've said it, I'm like, yeah, doesn't everyone? But I actually don't think everyone does. I want my stitching to be eye-catching. I want, when you walk into a room that has my stitching up, I want your eye to go like this, right at it. I don't necessarily need it to, I don't want it to blend in with the decor of my house. I don't want it to, well, I guess sometimes I do, but I guess if I want my stitching to be eye-catching, I want it to be eye-catching in like the most intense way possible. And I think that's really also why I've been so pulled to these red colors, particularly when it comes to Franzi, which I'm not showing you, and you'll have to find out what that is. Clickbait, watch my next video. Yeah, I would say those have either been the ones that I've been successful at in the way I intended, or things that have just kind of happened without me intending them to. I will say I did have one pretty big, I don't want to call it a failure, but one kind of swing and a miss, which is maximum motif density. So early on of my floss tube, not early on in my stitching, early on this year, I had this idea of stitching a piece that I was calling maximum motif density, which was where I was pulling motifs from a variety of different samplers and putting them all onto one piece of fabric with absolutely no concern for consistency or coherence. And the goal was to pile them up on top of each other and just have it be kind of a bold but like muddled mess. And particularly at the time, I was feeling very overwhelmed by like the images on my phone. I am on Instagram quite a lot less now. I have deleted Facebook, so I'm not as overwhelmed by the images on my phone. I'll always be a TikTok girl, but the reality is I have trained that TikTok algorithm so crazily that like it's my, like I run TikTok now, right? The thing about Instagram, particularly Reels, is like they are trying to run you. But TikTok doesn't feel like that to me. I'm in charge of TikTok. I'm in charge of my For You page. But yeah, I think that it was kind of my response of being slammed in the face with all of these different images and like not really being able to process them, because no one can process them. And if you're in my comment section being like, I can process all the images, you're either not getting images in the way that I am, or you're lying to yourself. Sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. Yeah. And I started it on a Lugana. Which, like, what an idiot, right? I was already kind of soured out with the Lugana, although I wasn't the hater then that I am now with Lugana, primarily because I've been, like, stitching on it. And I started it, and I stitched on it some, and stitched on it some. And I hit a point where I realized that I actually didn't need a project to do this. I didn't need a maximum motif density project to do this, because the concepts that were kind of existing in maximum motif density were actually existing in huge numbers of my projects. Is that many of my projects leading up to that, and also the ones that I had started after that, were already grappling with these same ideas, just in kind of a more interesting way. And I think kind of a couple of the colors I chose, I hated. So I didn't like the fabric I was stitching on. I felt like I was kind of pulling I think if I were to do it now, which I'm not going to do it now, although I do think that like some of the ideas, particularly about layering stitches on top of each other, and layering motifs on top of each other, to be quite interesting. And I think I probably will at some point in the future kind of bring that one back out. Yeah, that one, it wasn't that it was a miss. It was that I thought that I needed to do something to process my own feelings about the world, that I actually was already mid-process. And I'm still in mid-process, but have certainly gotten better. And also, I've gotten better at reading the images. So yeah, maximum motif density was something that was kind of my like phrase of the year. And while the project was kind of a whatever and is not in my whip pile anymore, as a concept, I do think that I've been able to pull it through. I've been able to pull it through to kind of the through the year. Is that I think if you look on any of my projects that I've started this year, you can point at them and say, like, that is someone who is really trying to process, like, living a life that is almost controlled by the image. And we can talk about, like, Guy Debord, and we can talk about Susan Sontag, and we can talk about blah, 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 right? The spectacle and the whatever. But yeah, I think maybe the project itself was kind of a flop. As a concept, I actually think that it will probably influence my stitching forever. Yeah, I would say those are kind of the big ones in terms of like a year in review of my stitching. I'm going to talk a little bit about Flosstube. I posted my first Flosstube in January. I have a bit of distance from it. For those of you who were there when I posted my first Flosstube, it was kind of a mess. I actually find the video quite good. I went back and rewatched it a couple weeks ago, which I never watch my videos. I watch them when I edit them, where I cut out all my coughs and when I drink and when I pick my nose and yeah. But after that, I never watch them again. And I did go back and rewatch this video. It's definitely a lot more loose than my videos are now. But I actually think the video was quite good. I also think that for the most part, the response I got to it was also quite good. I would say for the most part, the people who were in my comment section, who were messaging me on Instagram, who like even just kind of talking about mentioning me in their videos, and also just kind of generally talking about me outside of kind of my kind of like there are the spheres that I control, right? Which is my comment section, my Instagram DMs, the comments on my Instagram, my email maybe. And then there are the ones that I don't, which are like the stitching tables at Midsummer Stitch. And I would say that at all of those places, the response, for the most part, has been quite good. I do think in some ways my first Flosstube kind of hit like a bomb. Which is such a really... I have trouble talking about this because I have narcissistic tendencies. I don't actually. Maybe I do. I don't know. But I do think that there were a lot of people who watched my first Flosstube and saw me talking about politics, saw me talking about philosophy, saw me talking about not cutting edge, but like avant-garde literature and art, and also my experiences like being kind of a queer person living on the fringes of society with a bunch of friends who also live on the fringes of society and who want to, right? And I do think that there was kind of people watching that where the response was either like, you're allowed to do that, or, oh, I'm doing that, I should make a Flosstube, or I can like form a community on Flosstube. And I think that has been really awesome. I definitely got some pushback. I definitely got crazy pushback. I don't want to sit here and pretend like everyone in my comment section was really nice. I am not going to pretend like I was not getting Instagram DMs just full of slurs, because I was. Because, like 10,000 people watched that video. I don't know why YouTube thought 10,000 people should watch my video, but they absolutely should not. That is not right. And so there was like a pretty negative pushback, and that was very hard for me because I also don't think that I've never seen anybody talk about Flosstube in that way, of being like, oh, you're going to get a lot of hate comments. Or you're going to get some. I don't want to say I got a lot. I would say I got maybe like 10, 20 that first month. Instagram DMs that were really, really vile. And I definitely got some comments that were less vile but quite negative. yeah, and I don't think I'd seen people really talk about that. And so I also want to be clear that, like, for any person watching this who is maybe a leftist or maybe like an anarchist or a communist or a socialist or a Marxist or a even my accelerationist girlies, my T for T lesbians, my sex workers, my what is it, like, queer, double amputee, BIPOC, hijabi, what, like, you guys know what I mean. For any people who are kind of existing outside of that kind of core group of straight, white, middle class, suburban, cis woman, you should definitely make a floss tube. Okay, you should absolutely make a floss tube, and you are going to meet so many really cool people, because I have met so many really, really amazing people on FlossTube. I don't know. Essentially, I made a FlossTube because I wanted to meet really cool people and I didn't know anybody in my life who was stitching. And I've definitely done that. And I also felt like that there was a type of discourse that me and my friends were having, and I know that people I'm watching on FlossTube are having with their friends. They're just not having it in their FlossTube videos. And that was something that I really wanted to, like, put my finger on, right? That there's this thing happening in the world. And I know it's happening because my friends and I are talking about it. And I know I'm looking at you and I'm listening to the things you're saying. And I know you and your friends are talking about it too, but you're not saying it here. And so I want to say it here because I want you to say it here. And I don't know if that one's been as successful. I do think that I don't want to say that one was me because I actually don't think it was me. I'm a nothing blip in a sea of very talented stitchers, but that was one of my goals for my floss tube. I think in many ways I have pulled myself even further into my bubble, into my social bubble, where I actually just I don't care, right? The reality is, like, we can talk about, like, Erica Kirk going on her My Husband Got Shot in the Neck concert tour. Like, essentially Erica Kirk is speedrunning Vox Lux. But the reality is, like, outside of being kind of funny, I don't care. Yeah. And so I think that's made things quite... It's made things better for me. Because there are things that I care about. And I can focus on those things that I care about. Which obviously, like... I don't know why I'm, like, pulling my punches now. I've been a year on FlossTube, and I'm already that bitch I was complaining about earlier, who's obviously having these conversations with their friends but not having it on FlossTube. But, like, I care about anti-ICE activism. And so I can care about that, and I can, like, work towards that, and I can do that in my daily life. I care about justice in Palestine, right? I care about the freedom and the agency of the Palestinian people and the end of the genocide in Palestine that the Israeli government is committing against the Palestinian people. I care about that, and, like, I'm doing that in my life. I don't give a fuck about Erica Kirk, right? I care about stitching beautifully, which is kind of crazy to put in context with the Palestinian people. I'm not saying they're equal, but I'm saying that, like, I do think that this year I've been a lot better, at least at this point, have been a lot better at being like, these are the things to me that really matter. And they don't all have to be super important, and they don't all have to be serious, but they matter to me. And I can, like, live those things in my day-to-day life, and my life will be really good for it. And so my life has actually been quite good. Even though I'm broke as fuck, and crazy stressed about life and school and whatever, but yeah. So that's been the year. Those are my finishes. And that's been how my year's gone. Thank you all so much for watching. I literally posted another video today. So the day I'm filming this, I posted another video that I filmed last week. And so I'll probably post this in like 5 days, maybe 6 days. And then I'm gonna film a whip parade. And I will show you all my whips. I only have 8 whips, which is crazy. And then I'll talk about my plans for the upcoming year. I have 4 starts planned, at least throughout the year already. And I'll show you those. And then it'll be 2026. It might be 2026 before that happens. But thank you all so much for watching. You all have made me have a really great year. Maybe you've helped. I'll give you that. I think that you posting on FlossTube has really pushed my love of cross stitching to an even more special place. I am so thankful for all of you. Everyone should have a FlossTube, even people who don't stitch. I'm desperate to see someone's FlossTube and have them just be like, I don't stitch, I just know. Actually, the reality is sometimes I watch people's FlossTubes and it's all haul, and I'm like, you don't stitch. But whatever. Okay, bye. I hope you all have a good Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate, or whatever. Whatever, bye. Bye.